I typed a website into my browser this morning and it appeared before my hand had finished leaving the keyboard. It felt instant and free and slightly boring. But in that fraction of a second, a system older than the web itself did something quietly astonishing, and almost nobody who uses it every day could tell you its name. It is called DNS, the Domain Name System. And here is the strange fact I want to sit with for a moment. The whole global directory that every website on earth depends on ultimately traces back to just 13 addresses, not 13,000. 13. Now, I should tell you where I stand, because this is going to end with an opinion. I think DNS is one of the most elegant things our species has ever engineered. And I also think that resting the entire internet on top of it is a quiet act of collective faith that we almost never stop to examine. Both of those are true at the same time. So start with the problem it solves. A computer does not think in names, it thinks in numbers, a long string for every machine online. You want a word you can remember? The machine needs a number it can dial. DNS is the thing in the middle that translates, and the cleanest way to picture it is an unimaginably large phone book. You hand it a name, and in the blink of an eye, it hands back the number your computer actually connects to, billions of times a second, everywhere on Earth. It was not always this graceful. In the early days, there was no phone book, just a single file. One master list of every computer, typed out by hand and copied from machine to machine. It worked right up until the network outgrew one file and one very tired administrator. So in 1983, a scientist named Paul Mockapetris split that list into a branching tree. No single machine has to know every name. Each part only knows the part beneath it, and who to ask next. That one decision is why the internet could grow from a few hundred computers to several billion without ever collapsing under its own weight. Here is what happens the moment you type a name. Your computer asks, in effect, who knows about this, and the question walks down the tree. It starts at the very top, at the root, which points it toward whoever handles .com, who points it toward the site itself, who finally hands back the number. 4 polite questions asked and answered in a few thousandths of a second. And the top of that tree, the root that every lookup traces back to, runs from those 13 addresses. They are labeled, almost anticlimactically, A through M. They are the master reference for the entire naming system, handed to every device that comes online, because without an agreed starting point, the tree has no trunk to stand on. Now I have to be honest, because 13 sounds more fragile than it really is. Behind those 13 addresses hide hundreds of physical machines scattered across the whole planet, all answering to the same identity. It is 13 doors, not 13 buildings. That redundancy is the reason the system has never once completely gone dark. But do not let that lull you, because the skein resting on top is genuinely hard to hold in your head. There are more than 350 million domain names registered on Earth, and not one of them would load for you without this translation happening first. It is, very quietly, the busiest lookup service that humanity has ever run. So what happens when it stumbles? We got a clear preview in 2016. The attackers broke into no bank, stole no password, and damaged no website. They simply buried one large DNS provider under a flood of junk traffic. And for a few hours, across much of America, Twitter, Netflix, Reddit, and PayPal all became unreachable at the same moment. Read that carefully, because it is the entire point. Nothing was actually broken. The websites sat exactly where they had always been. The phone book just went silent, and suddenly half the internet could no longer look up anyone's address. The building stood untouched. People had simply forgotten how to find them. And here is where I get a little irritated. DNS was built in a gentler era when the machines on the network mostly trusted one another, and for years it never really checked whether the answer it handed you had been tampered with. A poisoned phone book sends you to the wrong address with a completely straight face. We have known about this for decades, the fixes exist, and yet adoption stays slow and endlessly deferred, because the thing works well enough on an ordinary Tuesday. We are remarkably good at ignoring our own load-bearing walls. Which brings me to what I actually wanted to say. We tend to imagine the internet as clouds and satellites, something too vast and modern to ever fail. But underneath the metaphor, it is far more human than that. It is a set of quiet agreements, a shared directory that works only because, billions of times a second, everyone agrees to trust the answer that comes back. And the master keys to that directory belong to no single government, governed by a kind of trust we very rarely stop to inspect. So here is the part that stays with me. The most powerful network we have ever built, the one we now run our money, our memories, and our conversations across, ultimately rests on a phone book. 13 addresses deep, that almost nobody has heard of, and that none of us personally control. And that is worth knowing. The next time a page appears before your hand has even left the keyboard, it is not magic, and it is not nothing. It is a quiet, 4-decade-old act of trust, doing its job so well that you were never really meant to notice it at all. They built the whole loud, chaotic, glorious internet on one calm idea, that a name should always be able to find its way home. The least we can do is know what is keeping the lights on.